In 1938, a devastating hurricane raged its way up the East Coast with horrendous results. And this was back in the days before they named hurricanes. I recently found an interesting little magazine called Every Week, and it was from October 3rd to the 7th, 1938, and it covers the story of that hurricane. And I wanted to share that with you. I think on the spot news like this is one of the best ways of taking a hop for a moment back through time. The article is titled, Lost Hurricane Hits East. Federal, state, and private agencies join forces to fight disease and rebuild homes destroyed by a tropical storm that struck at an unexpected point. Millions gathered around their radios one afternoon recently. They awaited the latest news from Czechoslovakia. Maurice Hindus, the foreign correspondent, was to speak from Prague. The announcer gave the word, a switch was thrown in the New York station, but no voice came from Europe. There was a pause. Then the voice of a New York announcer came on the air once more, and he said, "The aerial of the shortwave station, which was to receive the message from Prague, has been blown down by a severe windstorm. We regret that we cannot bring you the voice of Mr. Hindus at this time." That was the first hint given a large part of the nation that one of the worst disasters in recent years was coming. A hurricane that had been thought lost at sea had turned once more towards the land. At the same time that New York felt the first suggestion of the hurricane, Florida was breathing a sigh of relief. During the months of September and October, the people of Florida are always on the alert for hurricanes. Weather bureaus, radio stations, and Red Cross stand ready to warn the people of approaching storms and aid them if the storm hits. Florida has seen hurricanes that crumble houses as if they were cardboard boxes. The strong winds uproot trees and sweep the coast with tidal waves. The worst recent hurricane in the South was in 1935, when 500 persons were killed. When radios in Florida announce an approaching hurricane, Floridians act quickly. 2 days before the wind began to blow in New York, Florida had its first warning. Over the radio came the news. A full-blown hurricane with winds traveling 75 miles an hour is centered 530 miles east-southeast of Miami. It is impossible to say where the center will strike. It will probably be somewhere between Palm Beach and the Southern Keys. At once Florida began to dig in. Merchants boarded up shop windows and housewives rushed to the store. They bought supplies of candles and coal oil. Light and heat are needed during a hurricane, and as electric wires snap quickly in the force of the wind. Grocers sold great quantities of baked ham and canned soups which require little or no cooking for use during the storm. All shipping in the area took cover. Emergency relief groups were ordered to be ready. The American Red Cross sent 5 of its emergency relief workers from Washington to Florida. The Weather Bureau announced that the hurricane was one of the worst in years. All through Monday night, Florida awaited storm bulletins and took every precaution possible. Then the radio brought a hopeful report. The storm was turning north. Florida's hopes rose. By Tuesday morning, the Weather Bureau brought the good news that the hurricane had turned out to sea. The people of Florida greatly cheered and returned to normal life again. For some hours, the hurricane roared north over the water. Weather observers believed it would turn out to sea and blow itself out there. And then the unexpected happened. The hurricane kept going directly north, riding directly for the northeastern states. The big blow that had missed Florida hit with all its force Long Island and New England, and these sections, unlike Florida, were not prepared. The racing wind piled up seawater before it. The tidal wave hit Long Island and southern New England, flooding many towns and villages. Hundreds of houses and cottages were destroyed. Warehouses and railroad boxcars that had been near the shore floated about in the water. At Providence, capital of Rhode Island, water rose 4 feet in the downtown section. Roofs were ripped off the chimneys. Many people pinned underneath them. Reports from Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, and other states showed that nearly 600 had been killed. Other hundreds were injured or homeless. The only bright side of the disaster was that the full force of the storm did not hit New York, where millions are crowded so close together in the city. Rain had been falling in New England for several days before the hurricane arrived. It it added a steady downpour. As a result, when the wind died down, parts of New England were still in grave danger. Streams were at high levels and threatening to overflow their banks. A disaster like this one that struck New England calls for help of the whole nation. The president of the American Red Cross called upon people to send aid. Food and clothing were needed by families whose homes had been destroyed. Floods made drinking water unsafe in some towns. The people were told to boil water before drinking it. Pure water was sent to some in railroad tank cars. National Guard soldiers were called out by several governors to help in the relief work and to keep order, and Boy Scouts gave valuable aid. Most important of all, doctors and nurses were rushed to the places hit by the storm. Diseases follow in the wake of every disaster. Before our health services were as good as they are today, disease sometimes took as many lives as a flood or hurricane. Doctors and nurses not only took care of those who had been hurt, they set about preventing disease as well. They vaccinated many for smallpox and gave hundreds serum to prevent typhoid fever. While water still surrounded Norwich, Connecticut, airplanes flew over the town and dropped serum for the use of local doctors. The Weather Bureau is constantly trying to find out more about hurricanes. They cannot be prevented, but the more weather experts know about the big blows, the better they will be able to warn people against them. The work of the Weather Bureau has prevented much loss of life and property from hurricanes in the southern states. The weather experts have learned many things about hurricanes, but they cannot tell exactly where they will go. If they were able to do so, they might have been able to give New England more warning. They have sent scores of small balloons into the upper air, carrying instruments to tell them about the course of hurricanes. They do know that hurricanes come out of the Caribbean Sea, usually during the months of September and October. They say it is caused by the changing of the seasons. The sun shifts to the south and warms huge areas of ocean water. Vapor rises from the water, and the warm air on the water surface becomes lighter. At length, the cold and heavy air above drops down and starts a huge whirlwind. The whirl sweeps along the surface of the earth, spreading disaster. And again, that article appeared in the publication Every Week of October 3rd through the 7th, 1938, and this was a school publication, not unlike the Weekly Reader that came later.